Welcome back. We're talking about Syria's future with the director of the Center for Middle East Studies at the University of Denver, Nader Hashemi, and from Damascus, Bassam Abu Abdullah, head of the Damascus Center for Strategic Studies. And joining us here in Washington is Rafif Jouejati, director of Free Syria, a non-profit humanitarian organization. She's also a spokesperson for a network of Syrian activists called the Local Coordinating Committee in Syria. Welcome to all of you again. Rafif, let me start with you this time. We've been talking about the election that President Assad has called in Syria. What kind of impact do you think that is going to have on the country and on resolving this conflict?
Well, I think it'll have zero impact on resolving the conflict in Syria. It's actually a farce. I would challenge anybody to tell me the last time there was a free and fair election in Syria with multiple candidates. So this is really just a non-starter and is actually a slap in the face of all the dead, imprisoned, internally displaced, and refugeed.
Nader Hashemi, I want to get to something else now, and that is the reticence on the part of Western nations to get involved in this in some way to offer greater support to the rebels in Syria. Why do you think there is that reticence?
Well, I think one word explains it, Iraq. And here in the United States where I live, the legacy of the Iraq War has sunk very deep roots, and any sort of suggestion that the United States should get involved in another conflict, particularly in the Middle East, sort of invokes the images of Iraq. No one wants to get involved, notwithstanding the widespread sort of acceptance in this country that there is massive human suffering in Syria, that the Assad regime is overwhelmingly responsible for that suffering. There's zero interest in getting involved. And the Obama administration has repeatedly said that, you know, they got elected, they came to power to end wars, not to get involved in any war. So I think that, in a nutshell, explains the reluctance to get involved in Syria and to support the opposition to the fascist regime in Damascus.
Rafif, do you believe that some of the reticence on the part of the West might be attributed to the fact that the United States especially is worried that it may be arming radicals, maybe harming people who are hostile to the United States?
That's possible now, but at the beginning of the revolution, when President Obama called on Assad to step down, in fact, when most leaders of Western nations issued the same call, the fact was that the Free Syrian Army was a secular force fighting for freedom and dignity and democracy and protecting civilians. Now you have other actors, but I believe Western powers can still control to whom the weapons can go.
Okay, let me go back to Bassam Abu Abdullah in Damascus. I want you to respond to what Rafif was saying a moment ago, that this election that is going to be taking place is a farce, that there never has been a democratic election in Syria, and the fact is that there will not be multiple candidates standing in a free and fair election in Syria.
No, absolutely. The election in Syria now by a new constitution, it's not only for President Assad if he will be a candidate, there are opportunity for others. So I am inviting the opposition to participate. It's not only to talk after 3 years. If they have millions of people behind them, as they declared many times, it is an opportunity for them to participate and to talk about their programs, not about their supporters. Their supporters should be Syrian people, not United States, not France, not Britain, not all the Western allies. But we know that, I'm sorry to tell you that what we call it opposition outside, they are getting their salaries from Saudi Arabia and Qatar. Because of that, they are representing themselves. For the election, we cannot stop our constitution, we cannot stop our country, especially when we face a real proxy war through terrorist groups, which is recognized from all centers in the United States and either from the CIA. They know that.
Right. Okay, Bassam, I want to get a quick reaction from you to what he was saying.
Absolutely. I would invite him to describe the electoral process in Syria in 20 words or less. Tell me who the other candidates are and describe to me the fate of those opposition leaders who have tried to negotiate with the regime and what threats they've been issued. Go ahead.
Okay, Bassam, do you want to answer that very quickly?
No, I will invite my colleague to Malula to see this revolution and the results of its revolution. This is dirty revolution. We know who behind this revolution. There's a revolution, if the Saudi Arabia and Qatar behind it, it's dirty, absolutely. It's not civilized. We are in front of terrorism and Al-Qaeda, and it's well recognized either in the United States. We are in a two-axis war between Syria, Iran, Hezbollah, Russia, China. This is the real what's going on, and Syria, this is a place where it's combating. The real needs for Syrian people, I think we believe in that more than United States, and United States is not a policy station to give me a certificate.
Okay, Bassam, I want to move on. I want to move on to another very important issue now, and that is the chemical attacks that have taken place in Syria during this civil war. There was one last year. There was a lot of controversy about what happened there, and there was one just a few weeks ago. But I just want to get back to the one last year. Initially, the United States and its allies blamed the Syrian government for this chemical attack. Then there was information that came out, primarily from the journalist Seymour Hersh, who found out that Turkey could have been involved in supplying sarin gas to the rebels. Can you enlighten us in any way on what happened there?
Yeah, let me clarify a couple of points, though. Yeah. We in the local coordination committees do not call this a civil war. We call this a popular uprising that is being crushed by military force, whether that is by the Assad regime or Hezbollah or Russia. And the Iranian Revolutionary Guard, we can't ever forget what the Iranians are doing in Syria. The chemical attack that was so widely reported last year was preceded by several smaller chemical attacks throughout the country. As early as December of 2011, activists in Homs were reporting the use of different types of toxic gases. Since the one last summer, we've had numerous instances, even in the last week, of chlorine gas being used. I read Seymour Hersh's article, and I wish he had put a little bit more time into actually researching facts rather than willy-nilly blaming Turkey for this. The true force that has the capability and range and power to use chemical weapons against civilians is the regime. It's the same power that causes them to use barrel bombs on civilian breadlines or cluster bombs throughout the country. My colleague wants to invite me to go to Ma'lula. I will ask him to go to Homs or Aleppo.
Bassam, what is the battlefield situation in Syria right now insofar as Aleppo is concerned, or Damascus, or other parts of the country?
I think I'm speaking from Damascus, and we can ask most of the Syrian people, they are against terrorism, and every Syrian simple citizen, he knows who is supporting these rebels or these terrorist groups, and I don't think that my colleague from Washington or from America don't know that who used the chemical weapon. The Seymour Hersh, you can read this article and other articles. This is very famous, and you cannot ignore that. The Syrian army don't need to use chemical weapons. Opposite of that, we cooperating with the international organization, with the United Nations for that. So I think this is some allegation which is nobody ignoring that, and the West he will deal with the reality in politics. You can dream whatever you want. After 3 years, the Syrian people could face this terrorism from around the world. I think you can ask the borders between the Recep Tayyip Erdogan, what he made in Kasab against Armenians. You can ask, we can every day receiving the presence from the terrorists around Damascus. So this is a very dirty game, and I think everything is clear more than before. Nobody can ignore that this is a war against the Syrian people.
And our apologies, we've lost our guest in Denver for the moment. Rafif, I want to get to something else, and that is the refugee situation. Does Syria run the risk of having an entire lost generation here? We're talking about something like 2.5 million people who are refugees, not to count the millions of people who are displaced within the country itself.
I think we're in very grave danger of having a completely lost generation. These children have not been able to go to school in about 3 years. Early on in the revolution, the regime actually turned schools into detention and torture facilities. These children have been without food, without clean water, without medical attention, without anything to do, really. And it is by the grace of those non-governmental organizations and relief organizations that there is any hope for the children of Syria. Many children have been targeted by snipers. They have been killed while waiting to pick up bread in bread lines. These children are indeed lost.
And that's where we have to leave it. Thanks to both of you for joining us. And that is it for this edition of The Heat. We would love to hear from you, so please send us your questions, comments, and story ideas to theheat@cctv-america.com. Once again, that's theheat@cctv-america.com. I'm Anand Naidoo in Washington, D.C. Thanks for watching.